Hi, I'm Pierre from Adsr, and thank you for coming to this live stream. Today I'm going to demonstrate a bit of the new analog Labview that got released alongside V Collection 8. You can find everything about V Collection 8. There's going to be a lot of other live stream that are going to be coming out, and a lot of info coming from Adsr in a couple of weeks until our introduction offer ends in January. So just check out the video, the comments in the video, and get more info if you're interested. But basically what I'm here to talk about today is analog Labview. And for analog Labview, what we really want to offer is to have the best intuitive, inspiring collection of keyboard sounds. And to do that, we are focused on helping you find the right sounds and making it your own in the most easy way possible. And for Analog Lab 4, we already spend a lot of time going to users, asking them questions on how they're using Analog Lab to make music. And for Analog Lab 4, we already had a lot of new features and small improvements to help the workflow of users. Now for Analog Lab V, we wanted to take it a step further and improve all the things that we were not 100% happy about. And one of the biggest improvements that's coming with Analog Lab V is the quality of the overall sounds and the quality of the controls. Now, to demonstrate that, I'm going to be using a Keylab MK249, but everything that I'm going to show you today can apply to any of Adsr Midi keyboards, but it can also apply to any other Midi keyboard, given that you do a simple setup to map your knobs to Analog Lab V knobs. And first I'm gonna go through a list of presets that I've prepared that demonstrates all the sounds of Analog Lab V and focusing on all the new sounds to really show what makes it so much better than the previous version. And after that, we'll go into the library, which is the core of Analog Lab V. So how you're gonna use the library and how you're gonna use the updated browser to find your sounds quickly and organize them. And finally, I'm gonna go a bit into how to make the sounds that you find your own by adding effects and tweaking the parameters. So let's start now by going to Analog Lab V, and I have opened the stage view of Analog Lab V. The stage view is a mode that allows you to create playlists of sounds that you like and organize them into songs, and it makes it so easy to just prepare for a live performance and perform with a view that is really focused on all the infos that you need at a given time. So I've ordered this demo playlist with different types of sounds, so it goes through pianos, electric pianos, organs, and then I start to have more synth sounds. So let's just start by the pianos. And for those who are not familiar with the instruments of V Collection yet, the Piano V is, as all the synthesizers in the V Collection and most of the instruments in V Collection, it's purely modeled instruments. So you won't have any samples and you won't have any artifacts of poor sample libraries pianos that you would hear what happens when you go from a low velocity to a higher velocity, or you would hear some artifacts when you stop playing a note and you hear the release sound of the sample. So you've got none of that, and on top of that, it makes it so much more expressive to play, because you have a very continuous evolution of the sound depending on how strong you play it, and everything feels very natural. And on Analog Lab V, we have a couple of the pianos. So in the Piano V, we have 9 models of pianos, which are an American grand piano Model D. There is also a German grand piano. The German grand is way more intimate, and you hear a bit more the sound of the hammers that hit the strings. And then you have the Japanese one that is a bit more bright, has a bit more overtones in the mid-range. It's a bit more presence, it's easier to fit it in the mix, but it's all of them have very nice tones. And then you get some presets that are a bit more cinematic. That's like this American roomy. We've got some acoustic upright pianos. We've also got a tech piano. Or a saloony vibe. We've got as well some of the very more creative presets, like pianos using a cinematic pad on top of it to make it really out of the world. So that starts to show what's possible in Analog Lab V and in Analog Lab before that. You can layer two sounds and create your own preset, layering two sounds and adding effects to it to make it a whole different sound that it usually was. This is a classic example of a piano with synth strings on top of it. And here I'm using one of the 4 macro knobs of the Keylab to impact the timbre of the sound. And on this multi, for example, the macro knob is controlling the mix between the piano sound and the strings and bringing some brightness to the strings, and the sounds gets I'll talk about the macros a bit more later. Let's go on the electric pianos, and that's something new in Analog Lab V, because we used to have a Rhodes, but we made a big update to our emulation of the stage piano. And the Stage 73 V2 is a very big update of our physical model engine, and it makes it so much better and so much more expressive. So it's such a nice keyboard to have inside the Analog Lab. One of the features of this Rhodes emulation is the phaser. Then, of course, we have the violator. we have a nice clavinet. And then, of course, we have also a bit more creative electric pianos. This one, for example, is using a stage, but adds a lot of reverb and delays, and it makes a very creative preset. And again, the Rhodes, you can also layer it with synthesizers to make something really evolutive. Then, of course, we have organs, starting by the most famous of the electric organs, the B3. And the B3 has a Leslie emulation. So with the mod wheel, you can activate or deactivate the slow, fast speed of the Leslie. And for example, on these presets, we have 4 macros that are assigned, and the first macro is adding a lot of drop. So you can go from a very subtle and very dark sound to a full organ sound by turning just one knob. Then you have access to the drive of the Leslie. You've got some other B3 presets, but we also have the Vox Continental Combo organ. We also have the Farfisa, which has a very dodgy and very crunchy sound. It's so nice to play. And one of the new instruments in Analog Labview is also the Emulator V that we just released. And with that, it adds a lot of new samples that allows us to have way more sounds that we used to have, because right now we have mostly pianos, electric pianos, and analog and digital synthesizers, but the emulator had a lot of acoustic samples built in. So now, for example, you can have a pipe organ that comes from the Emulator V inside the Analog Labview. So it adds a lot of different possibilities to the sounds you're going to make in Analog Labview, because you can, for example, combine this pipe organ with some other sounds to make something more creative. But let's continue, and now I'm going to display a lot of what Arteria is the most famous for, which are the synthesizers. And one of the most requested kind of synth sounds are the pads. So I'm going to show you one preset of the Juno, which is also a new product of V Collection 8. And here you'll see that I'm touching the 4 first knobs of the keylab, and they are assigned to the 4 macros of all the presets that you have in Analog Labview. And for example, on this pad, you can reduce the time of the envelope to make a whole different sound. So by turning one knob, I make it a whole different sound. Let's continue. Second pad, one of the most famous analog synthesizers of all time, and one which is very famous for pad sounds and for key sounds. It's the Jupiter, that also is a new product. You could argue that it's an update, but it's very much like a new product because it sounds so much better than it used to be. And of course, we still have a lot of different kind of sounds from all the previous VEC collections. The GX7 is a very good example of. And I'm not going to go through all the pads because we've already made a lot of demos about what kind of synths you have in V Collection and in Analog Labview. But for example, we also have this new instrument in the V Collection 8, which is the OBX-A. And in Analog Labview, you now get a lot of sounds from the OBX-A. Next up is strings. Of course, we have the Solina, famous, but we also have new kind of strings in Analog Lab V because we integrated a lot of Pigments presets. So if you're not aware, Pigments is a modern synthesizer that was created by Arturia. It's not an emulation of a vintage synthesizer. It's our own instrument, and it allows us to have way more modern and way different sounds thanks to the different kind of synthesis you have. So it can play samples, it can play wavetable synthesis, and it can have virtual analog synthesizers as well. So the presets Pigments bring to Analog Lab V really make it a new product. Again, these presets, combining the EMU and Pigments, show how you can use acoustic sounds and combine them with a more synthesized sound to make it something really unique and creative. Then you also get more pluck string sounds like this shamisen from the GX7. Or one that sounds a bit more like a guitar, but that would be played by robots or whatever. Now let's listen to a couple of leads that we have in Analog Lab V. So the first lead that I've selected here is also a DX7. Let's see. Very expressive lead. It's like perfect to play a fusion solo. This lead is from the Juno, is a bit more soft and very nice to play with as well. Then you've got more classic Minimoog style. Again, another Minimoog preset which calls for bending the pitch bend. And I'm not going to go through all the leads, but you have got a lot of synthesizers that are able to make good lead sounds. The Matrix 12, you've got also the Oberheim SAM, and so on and so on. But now let's listen to a couple of bass. This one is also a Minimoog preset. It's a very almost acoustic jazz bass sound. Another sound from the Jupiter. A sound from the Matrix, who does the like very impressive bass sounds. This one is also like a very fat bass from the OBX. This one is a Jupiter preset that goes crazy. And this one, I haven't shown any preset from the CMI yet, so the CMI is a digital synthesizer that offer a lot of vintage sampled sounds. This is a nice slap-based. And Analog Labview is very strong for key sounds, synthesized key sounds. So I'm going to show a bit of the sounds from the keys. And sadly, I'm not going to have time to go through all the keys that are prepared, because it takes me too long to play every preset, because it's so nice to play them. So I can't really stop playing them. So I need to go to other presets. This one is a flute, straight from the Mellotron. So something that's also new in Analog V is that you have way more presets from the Mellotron V that you used to have. So you've got those nice classic sounds that you get in the Beatles, and yeah. You've got also like more synthetic flute sounds. A clarinet that comes from the emulator again. You've got this classic preset from the OBX8. And you've got a lot of other different brass sounds, synthetic brass sounds, like for example this preset from the CZ. Again, I'm not going to go through all the brass sounds. Let's start listening to more sounds, like more complex sounds. And in Analog V we also have sequences. So for example, we have this preset of the Jupiter. The problem with sequences is that every time you load a sequence preset, you spend an hour on it, so it's very hard to not lose too much time. Then I've got some multis that are prepared as well. So this one is very... So this preset, for example, is using one of the features of Analog Lab, which is the split. So you can split presets, two instruments across the keyboard. So for example, my right hand is going to play the right instrument and my left hand is going to be playing the left instrument. So this one is playing like an arpeggiated sequence and the right is playing a melody. And there are a ton of things you can do with this mentality. There we have a nice mini Moog duo with one that is playing the bass drum and the other that's playing the snare to make some trap beats. we have some new sounds that were not really present in Analog Lab V. We have way more vocal sounds thanks to the Emulator V and thanks to another instrument that I'm going to show just after that. Let's skip through a couple. This new instrument that I was wanting to show you is the Vocoder. So we released as well the Vocoder V for V Collection 8, and this allows to have way more sample of voices, and they're going to be vocoded.
Was an ice cold, and all I've ever needed was an ice cold me. All I've ever wanted was an ice cold me, and all I've ever needed was an ice cold me. All I've ever wanted was an ice cold me.
All right. Then I also wanted to show you a couple of sound effects. And you get a lot of different sound effects when you use Analog Lab V, but I'm not going to go too much into them because I'm mostly a keyboard player, so I'm going to focus on keyboard sounds. But here are also a lot of drums. This one is from the Juno. And so on and so on. I'm not going to go too much into the drums, but you even have some more complex drums and even drum beats. So for example, you can load the full functional beat. But I think that's enough for the demonstration of the sounds that you've got in Analog Lab V. I believe that you've had enough. Let's now look at what's in the core of Analog Lab V, and it's the library. Because for V Collection 8, we decided that we wanted to really update the preset browser of Analog Lab and of all the instruments of V Collection. So we decided to really update the way we're going to display the sounds, and we made a very visual and very good-looking interface to browse your presets. So when you open Analog Lab V, you arrive on a home page that allows you to quickly get to your favorite types of sounds or to your favorite instruments. So on the left of the interface, you'll see that you have the Home, Explore, and Store. So this is where you're going to browse for new sounds, explore new sounds. Then you've got access to your library, which is going to allow you to get to presets that you have either recently played or that you liked or that you have saved to make your own presets. You also have access to your sound banks that either you've created or the sound banks that you've bought from the store. And finally, you got access to the playlist at all times. So when you're creating a playlist and making a list of sounds that you want to get back quickly and to perform live, if you want to prepare a set list for a performance, you can have it here. And it's way easy to just browse presets and add it to the playlist by drag and dropping on them. But let's start by using the home page. And for example, I'm gonna click on Show All Results to just show the list of all the presets that are inside Analog Lab. So here you can see that I have 2,400 presets. So when I want to create music, I'm gonna look for a precise instrument or for a precise type of sound. And for this, you can, for example, use the search bar and look for anything from instruments, types, style of sounds, or sound banks, or even sound designers. So for example, let me try to type pink. And if I type pink, I have, for example, the filter of the bank that's called Floyd Tribute. So I can look for a sound bank that's called Floyd Tribute, and it's a tribute to Pink Floyd, obviously. And here I'll get all the banks, or all the presets that are inside the Pink Floyd Tribute sound bank. And that's nice, but if I want to have less sounds and I want to filter out even more sounds, I can, for example, press Command F on a Mac or click on the search bar to filter it even more by typing, for example, bass. And here I'll then get all the bass sounds that are in the sound bank. And if I'm not happy about this search, I can delete filters that I just selected by clicking on the filters, or by clearing all the filters that I've activated by doing so. And sometimes I don't know exactly what kind of sounds I'm looking for, so I want to get inspired and try a bunch of sounds. So what I can do, for example, is I know I'm looking for a bass sound. So I know that I love the Minimoog, the Matrix 12, and also, for example, the Moog Modular. So I want to find bass sounds from all of the 3 instruments. So I can click on one of the filters on top of the preset list, and I can browse for Matrix 12. I select Matrix 12, Mini and Modular. I can select multiple instruments in the filter by pressing Command and click on a Mac, or it would be Control click on a PC. And then I want to go for bass sounds, and then I get all the bass sounds that are coming from either the Matrix and that's nice, but sometimes when I do this kind of search, I end up being on the same 10 first presets of my list, and I want to find a way to, when I come back to a search and I want to find sounds from the Mini, the Modular and the Matrix that are bass sounds, I want to find new sounds every time. So that's why in Analog Lab 4 we added the Shuffle button, which will allow you to, whenever you add filters, the lists will be ordered in a random way, which will allow you to, when you select the next preset, to have a different preset than you would have the last time that you used. So that's a very nice way to find new sounds, even though you always search in the same way. And if you find a sound, for example, let's go back to the jazz bass. And you like the direction it's taking, but you would like to find other sounds that are very similar to this jazz bass sound, but you don't really know how to look for them. So, for example, I have this sound, and here you can access the Discover Similar presets. So what Discover Similar preset is doing is using a machine learning algorithm that we've trained on a huge database of presets to really analyze what's make the sound of every preset, and we map them to get the closest preset to every other preset. So when I find similar preset to the jazz bass, I'm going to have a bunch of presets that sounds very similar to this jazz bass. And it works very well for the first bunch of presets, but as you go down the list, you get presets that are further and further away from the original preset. So this preset is still a bass sound, but it's quite different. It has way more overtones. So for example, I can try to even start from this preset and find presets that are even more different by clicking the recommend button on this, and then I'll have another list of presets. So it's a very nice way to just take a preset that you kind of like and make it find a whole different presets that you wouldn't have found otherwise if you didn't have this feature, probably. And yeah, once you've found sounds that you really like, what you want to do is usually that you want to put them somewhere safe, that you can find them again or have a way to recall them quickly. So one of the most obvious way to do it is by using the like button that's in the toolbar, or you can press in the toolbar, or you can also press in the preset list to like the presets. And once you've liked some presets, you can just go on the like page of the left panel, and you will see a list of all the presets that you've previously liked. In a similar way, when you like a preset but you want to make some changes, or you want to really make sure and organize it in a way that you're going to find it next time you're going to use it, you can save these presets as a user preset. So there are two ways to do this. You can either click on the preset menu here and click Save As, or you can also open the toolbar menu and click Save As to save as user presets. And once you've saved those user presets, they will be displayed in the Save Presets. So in Save Presets, you get access to all the presets that you've previously saved, so either presets that you've made yourself or presets that you liked and wanted to find quickly. And in these saved presets, you can still use the filters and still narrow down your search to quickly get the presets that you wanted to use. And when you save a preset, you can put it in a user bank, and you can have multiple user banks. So we put the My Banks tab that allows you to either go to sound banks that you bought from the store, or to find user banks that you created yourself and quickly access them. Finally, you've got the playlist. So when you have a sound that you really like and want to be using more often, or you want to use it in a live performance, you can simply drag and drop a preset on a demo playlist, for example. Or you can simply drag and drop on the playlist name in the left panel, and then it will simply add the presets at the end of the playlist. You can also go in the menu, in the preset menu, and add the preset to the playlist. So those are different ways to organize your sound. And once you've organized your sound, especially on a playlist, you can, by adding them to the playlist, you can then select a preset in your playlist and put it in a song. So you can create a lot of different songs for a live performance, or if you want to organize presets in banks in your playlist, you can do it that way as well. And when you're using a Midi controller, you can either automatically send messages from your keylabs to load a preset in a playlist, or you can also use Midi program changes to select a preset with any Midi controller that's capable of sending Midi program changes. Same with a DAW. You can tell your DAW to send a Midi program change to change a preset in a playlist, which would allow you to create more complex projects in your DAW to change the presets on the fly. And once you've created your playlist, there are a lot of different ways you can edit your playlist. And for example, you can reorder the presets in your playlist, which is really handy, and you can't really do that in Soundbanks or in the preset browser. You can also right-click on a preset to copy a preset, to delete a preset, or to duplicate it. And you can also, when you have a preset in a playlist that you like and you changed it a bit and you want to be able to find it again later, you can save these presets in a user banks to find it again later. And one thing to mention is that playlists are always saved in a temporary state. So every time you do something to the playlist and you don't remember to save it and you close Analog Lab and open it again, when you open the playlist, it will still have the state it was before you quit. So this makes it way safer to play around with your playlist and edit sounds and keep the changes that you made. But sometimes you don't want to keep the changes that you made and you want to revert the changes because you were just fooling around with your concert playlist and you want to revert it back to get to the original state. So to do that, you can simply press the menu button of the playlist and click revert changes on playlist. So it will revert changes to the last time you actually saved the playlist. So to save the playlist, you can just click save. And that's it for the playlists. So let me just finish by talking a bit about the new view that we added in the Analog Lab V, which is the Studio view. So for those of you who are familiar with Analog Lab 4, the Studio view is just an extension of the mixer that we had in Analog Lab 4, and we just wanted to make it nicer looking and have a bigger view of what you're doing when you're editing your song. When you're editing a multi, you want to have a good feedback of what you're doing. So in this view, for example, I have a Rhodes, but let me, for example, take a piano. So I'm going to go and explore. I'm going to open a piano. American. Yes, let's go for this one. So if I go on the Studio view, you'll see on the left that I have my piano, and then you'll see a bunch of effects and delay, reverb, and you'll see an equalizer. So on every preset in Analog Lab V, you've got a delay, a reverb, and an equalizer on the master. So you can immediately, by turning one of the knobs of the keylabs, for example, you can add reverb to any sound, or you can change the mix by adding more bass, or instead removing bass. So you get quick access to very simple edition of the sound. And if you want to add different effects, you can, for example, add a little bit of distortion if you want to have a bit more overtones. That's too much. If I want to add a bit of compression, I can do it here as well. Compressor. So you can quickly add effects to your instruments and to all your presets in Analog Lab V. But what you can also do in this view is add an instrument. So if you want, for example, to add strings, you can just click on part 2. And then you can look for example, I'm going to go for Solina and get a nice string sound. Just, for example, this one. And if I go back, so here I have added Solina strings on top of my piano, and for example, I can change a bit of the brightness of the piano. So you can see in a very quick way, you can just combine two sounds, add effects to make a more cinematic grand piano, for example. And I think that's it for the demonstration I wanted to make of Analog Lab. And now, if you have some questions, I think we have a bit of time to answer them. But first, let me remember you that we have currently a launch offer that ends January 10. And of course, something that I didn't mention is that Analog Lab V update from Analog Lab 4 is free. Has been since Analog Lab 2. We are very excited to bring updates to our instruments for free. And yeah, I hope you all like it. So I've got a feature idea, maybe to add a drag and drop function for organizing presets in the future. For example, I would like to select a couple of presets and just drag or copy paste instead of saving a new preset for each. Yes, it's a feature that has been asked already and it's in the pipeline, but it's something that would be nice indeed, I agree. Is polyphonic glide doable on the Mini V? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think if you want to have polyphonic glide, you should probably use the Jupiter or one of the analog polysynth that already did it on the original. We didn't really did things that were not in the original synthesizer, so I don't think the glide on the Mini V would be as interesting as it is on the Jupiter, for example. Would like to see more in-depth browsing through banks and libraries using the MK2. I'm planning on... Yep. Yeah, I think we'll do a video showing a bit more of the browsing using our controllers in a later video because it would take a bit more time. But we already did a video back then, and I think we're going to do another video at some point to really show the integration with the MK2, but also with the other ones. And I think it deserves a whole segment to demonstrate it and to show it properly on the Keylabs. When will NKS be available for new sounds? So Analog Lab usually is not available for NKS. It's the instruments themselves of V Collection 8 that are available in NKS. So Analog Lab V is not going to be compatible with NKS either. Or I mean, you will be able to open Analog Lab V inside complete control for, but we don't plan on making it compatible. And I don't know when the instruments are supposed to be compatible with NKS, but I believe they should be at some point. I don't know when though. Can I give an example of how to save a preset for a song? So I believe it's for a playlist. It's a song inside a playlist. So for example, I'll take whatever sound. So this one, I like it. So if I wanted to save it, I would do save as and it would be saved. But once I've saved it, I can just take this preset, drag and drop, and add it to my playlist. And I put it here. So this is my piano song. And I can just put it in my piano song. And you'll see that the first preset of this song is now strings. I don't know if that answers the questions, but basically the songs are piano, electric pianos, and organs in this playlist. So I just added the ambi strings 1 preset to my piano song of my playlist. How to create a folder on my bank. So there are no folders in the banks. The banks are actually the folders. So if you look at this, you have you can create multiple banks, but you can't create a subfolder for each of those banks right now. It's a feature that might be implemented at some point, but right now it's not possible. Can we export Analog Lab 4 preset to Analog Lab V? Is it easy to do? Can you copy presets to another computer? So Analog Lab 4 to Analog Lab V, it's really easy to do because you just see your Analog Lab 4 preset in Analog Lab V. All the presets that you had in Analog Lab 4 will open directly in Analog Lab V. You don't need to import them. But there's one thing that you should know is that if you made multi-presets, or if you added effects to your presets in Analog Lab 4, the effects are not going to be loaded in Analog Lab V because we changed drastically the effects and the way we process the effects in Analog Lab V. So we couldn't guarantee to have compatibility of the effects. So you will have to, if you added some modulation effect, if you added some reverb, you will have to add it again. So that can take a bit of time, but it's the only way we could make it so it's so we could really update the effects without losing completely the preset. But there was something else in the question that I didn't answer. Can you copy presets to another computer? It's pretty easy to copy presets. The way you would do it is to click on the menu in the toolbar and to export either a bank or a preset. And then on the other computer, you can just import a bank. It's just files that you can send and open in your file system. Analog Lab V is installed. Can I remove the 4, or are there presets present just on 4? And I have to stick with both. So that's a good question. So for Analog Lab V, we really wanted to clean up the whole browser, especially for new users. So we wanted to have only presets that make sense for Analog Lab, and focus on having a big variety of sounds and the highest quality of sounds. In Analog Lab 4, you had a bit more sounds, but there was a bit of redundancy, and a lot of them were, there were a lot of analog, vintage analog synthesizers that sounded quite similar. The presets sounded quite similar. So we wanted to filter out a bit of the Analog Lab 4 presets and have a bigger sound palette, because we have a lot of newer sounds as well. But that being said, if you have Analog Lab 4, installed and you install Analog Lab V, you will see all the presets that you were using in Analog Lab 4. So we won't lose any presets. And if you want to uninstall Analog Lab 4, you will still have the presets. It's just that if you install a new machine and you only install Analog Lab V, you won't have necessarily the Analog Lab 4 preset. So you can uninstall Analog Lab 4 without any problem. And the license to Analog Lab 4 gives you the right to have the sounds that you were using in Analog Lab 4. Is there a plan to support natively third-party MIDI controllers? So I guess it's asking if we could automatically map the knobs to any MIDI controller. It's something that we would like to add at some point. It's a lot of work to pick what are the MIDI controllers that we should do, because we need to analyze what are the MIDI mappings of those keyboards to automatically map to them. And it's quite a tedious task, but it's definitely something that we want to work on at some point, yes. In split mode, is it possible to associate a sort of morphing between two sounds to a fader? So I guess it's not only in split mode, because like for a multi, you can just assign a macro to morph between the sound on part 1 and the sound on part 2. So, but on a split, if you do this, it wouldn't sound right, because if you have a split, then one of the hands is not going to make any sound. So I think it works for a multi. For a split, I'm not sure I understand what you would do in this. How much control is there over the presets? Can you control ADSR? So on the keylabs, for example, or on the keylabs, you still can control the ADSR individually, like the attack, decay, release individually. But if you don't have faders on your controller, so for example on a mini lab, the best way to control the ADSR is to use the Micro 3, which is controlling the ADSR envelope. And the way we've done the macros is that depending on the presets, you will change the thing that makes the most sense for the ADSR. So it will usually change either the decay and the release, or change the attack of the release and the release of the ADSR. For pads presets, for example, you will more affect the attack than the decay. The decay is more going to be for plucked sounds. Got a new Apple Silicon Mac Mini. Does V Collection and Analog Lab work on this machine? I think it does. I think we don't have any problems with Apple Silicon, but I don't trust me on this. I haven't looked into it that much. Does Keylab integrate well with Reason? The Keylab integrates okay with Reason. We don't have like a DAW integration as much as we have on Ableton Live, and it doesn't have Mackie control, so we can't use the same protocol that we're using. It's compatible, but you're not going to be allowed to control the volumes of your tracks in Reason or this kind of deep integration. I thought I had to upgrade my setup, but I would learn how to play keyboard like you. Great job. Thank you. And that's it. Well, thank you a lot for joining, and I really hope this was interesting and I answered most of your questions. And yeah, if I really hope that in the future I can make another video to show the new sounds that we're gonna add in the future to Analog Lab, because you can expect that it's gonna keep evolving and we're gonna keep adding sounds and making it better and better. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll just finish by playing some sounds.